Rome wasn't built in a day, but that's all it took for the civilization to fall when the last Roman emperor was deposed. And companies have it even harder, with only a select few lasting a century or so. According to Forbes, of the businesses that made the Fortune 500 list way back in 1955, only 12 were still around by the year 2014. That's an 88% drop, the corporate equivalent of an apex predator going extinct in a single generation. In your own lifetime, you've no doubt seen one-time behemoths of business go bust, broke, or get bought out. But even the sloth dodged a few asteroids, ice ages, and volcanic eruptions. That's why a few business lineages beat the odds without ever needing to become giants. The oldest company in the world is Kongō Gumi, a construction company from Japan who got their start building shrines and temples way back in the year 578. This company's start was as close to Jesus as you are now to William Shakespeare. However, even that is disputed because it had to be saved from liquidation by another company, not because it was a money-making machine, but because of its cultural significance. After all, is it the same company if the name is the same, but the structure is different? What if it changes industries, but not the logo? It's like the old joke of the street broom that never retires because it keeps getting a new brush and handle. But today, we're not going to get bogged down in the philosophical weeds. Instead, we're going to focus on the main survival strategies that help a business to do one thing it's not supposed to do: survive. So it's time to learn how history works as we explain how to make a business that will last 1,000 years. Evolve or die. This advice might sound like a case of the bleeding obvious, but the corporate graveyard is filled with ghosts of CEOs who refuse to get with the times. MySpace was knocked off the top spot by Facebook because it focused too heavily on music. Microsoft was too scared to branch out into music players, which was how longtime rival Apple overtook in sales, recognition, and reputation. And let's not forget that Blockbuster committed financial suicide by refusing to go into streaming when Netflix was a startup looking for a buyer. So when it comes to the best example of how to know when to change things up, look no further than Nintendo. They may be known as one of the most formidable video game giants of modern times, with billions upon billions in the bank. Yet this company is older than video games, having got its start making playing cards back in 1889. At the time, Japan had removed the laws prohibiting Hanafuda playing cards, so Fushijiro Yamushi set up a company to capitalize on this emerging market. Soon, Nintendo was licensing third parties like Disney, but when the new CEO of the booming Japanese company saw the size of the warehouse owned by America's biggest trading card company, he was crestfallen by how limited his company could grow. Nintendo's attempts to pivot into more lucrative industries included taxi firms and love hotels, but it was only when a worker designed a toy claw in his spare time did the company focus on toy manufacturing. The success showed that Nintendo was closer to their specialism, but they still needed that one toy to become their niche. Lo and behold, video game arcades arrived. Let's not forget that these things are still technically toys, which was the reason Nintendo decided to give these things a shot. Again, things were going well, but not well enough. All they needed was to figure out what made their video games different to everyone else's. Then came along a young intern who designed Donkey Kong, and finally the company became a giant conglomerate in the world of consumer electronics. And it wouldn't have happened if they weren't prepared to experiment, pivot, and change the industry. But there might be times when it's better to find a stable market. Find a timeless product. Funeral parlors only need to worry about going out of business when someone cures death. So finding a market based around necessities gives you a stronger chance of making it through hard times. These are known in economics as necessity goods, which means they are goods and services consumers buy regardless of income levels. Think haircuts and food, plus the water, gas, and electricity for homes. It also includes addictive habits like tobacco and alcohol, as well as critical medicines such as insulin, plus hospital equipment like bandages, gauze, and face masks. In short, the common things everyone needs and buys all the time, but don't cost that much to the individual. At the end of the day, everything you use is made by a company, no matter how incidental. It's like that scene in Cocktail where Tom Cruise explains how even paper cocktail umbrellas are making someone $1 million. A look at the oldest companies in the world reveals their sectors include construction, hotels, food, drink, and paper. However, it's much harder to get rich on babysitting and toothpaste than it is on Bitcoin and social media. Then again, the tortoise beat the hare, so it depends on your priorities. The less glamorous your business, the more you can weather the storm over the next 1,000 years, no matter how many revolutions, invasions, and natural disasters come your way. Coke may be a worldwide phenomenon, but what it spends on advertising and marketing is almost what it makes him profit. It's hard to imagine a world without soda, but will their bubble burst eventually? Besides, this is only a means to an end. Once you've got enough cash, you can do the next step. Expand and multiply. It would be nice if your income all came from your work, but examining the biggest companies in the modern world reveals how businesses prop up their main enterprise with a series of revenue streams. Take Apple. Do they sell MacBooks to fund the development of iPhones, or do they sell iPhones to fund the development of MacBooks? What makes more money? Their cut on the App Store, or the sales of AirPods? They all exist within an electronics ecosystem with shared knowledge, but they are distinctly different as a plane is from a car, even when it's made by BMW. That's why the real trick is finding a subsidiary that is more profitable than your main area. And for that, we need to look at the business genius of George Lucas. This man did more to change the structure of the film industry than Walt Disney and Charlie Chaplin combined. Lucas has never shied from criticizing the studios, which is how he knew that he needed to find a way to beat them at their own game. So when they agreed to let him make Star Wars, he had an idea. Offer them a reduced fee for writing and directing in return for 100% of the merchandising rights. Let me say that again. George Lucas got 100% of Star Wars merchandising rights. How did he swing that? Because he figured out that franchises were the next step for tentpole releases. He saw that the real money was in the distribution window with toys, lunchboxes, t-shirts, and then, when the technology developed, video games. Collectively, more money has been made from Star Wars merchandise than the films. In fact, the initial line of toys from A New Hope made Lucas so filthy rich that he was able to fund the remaining movies himself. So, although other studios helped release them in theaters, every film after the first Star Wars installment was technically an independent movie, which is what Lucas wanted.
Yeah, definitely.
Even though he was a better businessman when it came to toys than movies, he's in it for the motion pictures. And that's why Star Wars is going to last 1,000 years, even when new owners Disney finally kicked the bucket. Unless, of course, you don't care about becoming a cultural icon, in which case you might prefer this next strategy: consume and conquer. When the two brothers from Warner finally decided to get into the motion picture industry, they had no way of predicting that their company name would one day be AOL Time Warner. That name is ridiculous. Could you tell me what the company does from looking at it? Thankfully, it became the simpler Warner Media in 2018, though time will tell if and when the name changes again. But the point is that the name became so convoluted because the business uses mergers and buyouts to stay in the game. Its first major shakeup was at the start of the 90s when it merged with the owners of Time magazine. No doubt you've heard of it. But I know some of my audience haven't heard of AOL, which was a company that mailed you free internet on a CD. Yes, you heard that right. That might sound crazy to you, but for people of a certain generation, AOL was their very first portal to the internet. Heck, it was connecting people before Google existed. Even so, the merger between Time Warner Inc. and AOL was controversial at the time because it came at the height of the internet bubble. Some said AOL was overpriced, and others said it was about to become obsolete. It would be like buying MySpace a month before Facebook debuts. But this is key to Warner Media's survival, because a sure way to avoid getting eaten by a predator is to get to the top of the food chain at any cost necessary. To date, the Warner Company has merged, bought out, and spun off so many companies that it's like a Frankenstein's monster of a corporation. Each new acquisition is cut up and stuck on to the point that the company would be completely unrecognizable in structure and service if it wasn't for their legacy name or their repeated attempts to revive Bugs Bunny. The downside to this approach is that executives and departments come and go faster than the company changes letterheads, but the benefit is the ability to stay afloat during some of the most difficult decades of the economy. Most companies are too precious about their identity and product to risk such radical shakeups, which is why they go bust during a recession, market crash, or pandemic. But not Warner Media. So if your objective is to stay in the game for as long as possible, take a page out of their book by making your business about business. However, there is one final strategy that doesn't involve going public or staying private. Join the government. Time will tell exactly how successful this will be, but judging from the success of Chiquita Bananas, it doesn't hurt to become bedfellows with the state. You see, Chiquita is the successor of the United Fruit Company, whose trade of tropical fruit at the turn of the 20th century saw them jockey their immense capital for power and influence. By the mid-20th century, the company was flourishing and controlling vast territories and transportation networks across Central America, Colombia, and the West Indies. Granted, it was competing with the Standard Fruit Company, who later became Dole, but it had maintained a virtual monopoly thanks to its interest from the United States of America. In fact, the relationship was so strong that the company was able to get America's help to quell strikes, overturn elections, and deal with rivals. The relationship between capitalism, tropical fruit, and corrupt government was so strong that the phrase Banana Republic was coined. And no, I don't mean the clothes shop. Anyway, in time, the company would suffer some financial difficulties and be reborn, though there's no doubt that its survival was helped by becoming a subsidiary of politics. Or was it politics that became a subsidiary of the company? The point is, getting the state to be your biggest shareholder is the best insurance a company can have, because it means your survival is tied to the life of a nation and not the volatility of the market. Think back to the banking crisis of 2008. Many countries bailed out the banks, including the UK government, who rescued NatWest. Good thing for the bankers. Their firm was on the brink of collapse. So if you're determined to make your company last longer than you, consider merging with a civilization. Just maybe not the Roman one. Which mega company do you think will go bust in your lifetime? And which startup do you think will be around in 100 years? Let us know in the comments. Now, there's one company in mind whose survival can be credited to their shady ties with the government. To find out why, go and watch our video on the business history of Amway. And be sure to like and subscribe to keep on learning how history works.